Hello, my name is Heather Bennycotter, and I am an accessibility specialist for the University of Toledo. And today we are going to review our student disability services process at the University of Toledo. So just to review the presenter information again, we are from the University of Toledo Student Disability Services Office, and the presenter information today is Jordan Funk, who is the Assistant Director of Digital Inclusion for Main Campus, and myself, Heather Bennycotter, and I am an accessibility specialist for the Health Science Campus, and I also work sometimes on Main Campus. So currently we have 2 student disability service locations at the University of Toledo in which we serve students. The first location is at the Health Science Campus in Mulford Library, room 130. And again, as I mentioned, I am an accessibility specialist for the Health Science Campus, and I mainly work with students in medical fields. Our other location is the Main Campus location. This is where we serve undergraduate students and incoming students. And this location is Rocket Hall, room 1820. So we are going to talk about the differences between when you are in college versus high school. When you're in high school, you fall under secondary law, IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004 is a United States law that mandates equity, accountability, and excellence in education for children with disabilities. As of 2018, approximately 7 million students enrolled in the U.S. schools receive special education services due to a disability. Under IDEA, the goal is that this law sometimes does allow fundamental alterations. So for example, if a student in high school is receiving testing accommodations, there are times where a student may be allowed only to answer the questions you know the answer to, work on the test in a group setting, possibly do an alternative assignment instead of the test and not take the test, have an unlimited time to take the test, and in addition, accommodations are listed in an IEP developed by teachers and parents. As we move forward with the presentation, I'm going to explain the differences between high school accommodations versus accommodations in the college setting. Under post-secondary law, we follow Title II of the Americans with Disability Act, the 1990, and Amendments Act. Student disability services is federally mandated, govern and adheres to the Americans with Disability Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is American legislation that guarantees certain rights to people with disabilities. It was one of the first U.S. federal civil rights laws offering protection for people with disability. Again, the civil rights legislation is non-discrimination. In accordance with the laws, Student Disability Services is committed to removing barriers for students with disabilities at the University of Toledo by ensuring that appropriate accommodations are provided. SDS works directly in partnership with students, instructors, administrators, and staff to coordinate and provide accommodations for students with disabilities. We promote equal access for students and strive for full inclusion. So during this slide, we're going to discuss the differences between high school and college when it comes, again, to accommodations. So as you can see, school districts and teachers are responsible for identifying students with disabilities within the high school setting. However, in the college setting, the student is responsible to self-identify and self-disclose as a person with a disability. The school and family often work together in high school to develop an IEP in order to define educational supports and services that will be provided. However, in the college setting, there is no IEP, Academic accommodations are determined based on the functional limitations of the disability and impact on the individual. Accommodations may vary based on the fundamental nature of the course. When it comes to high school, with special education, fundamental alterations to the curriculum are made. Examples could include different courses, modification of course requirements, assignments, tests, or test requirements could be altered. However, within the college setting, there is no special education. No fundamental alterations to the curriculum are made. Students must meet the same academic requirements, standards, and fundamental objectives as the other students in the course in order to pass. When it comes to high school, services such as ensuring a student takes medication, orientation and mobility training, or assistance with personal care. However, within the college setting, students are responsible for time management, personal care, and their own medication needs. So we're going to provide a continuation of the differences between secondary and post-secondary differences. So in the high school setting, school districts often provide free testing, evaluation, and transportation. The type of testing usually is a psychological assessment that can include numerous components such as norm-referenced psychological tests, informal tests and surveys, interview information, school or medical records, and medical evaluation and observation data. This is free in the high school environment. However, if a student were to require this testing within the post-secondary environment, the student is responsible for the cost. In addition, the student is responsible for transportation to and from the campus. When in high school, transition planning exists to clarify students' vision, identify program choices, and coordinate coursework options. However, at the post-secondary level, students are responsible for making all of their course selections and generally when they plan on taking the courses. At the high school level, classes are typically 40 to 50 minutes long and generally last all day. Where at the post-secondary level, classes may be 50 minutes or 1 hour and 40 minutes, and classes can be early in the morning, afternoon, or sometimes classes are offered in the night. What documentation is helpful to our office when determining accommodations? We evaluate multi-factored evaluations. So the MFE is a process required by IDEA to determine if a child is eligible for special education services. The process may be initiated either by the school or the parent. We look at the individualized education plan. So with the IEP, this is a legal document under United States law that is developed for each public school child in the U.S. who needs special education. It is created through a team of the child's parent and district personnel who are knowledgeable about the child's needs. We look at psychoeducational assessments, which refer to the evaluation of underlying mental processes impacting educational workplace achievement and life management abilities. To understand why a person achieves at a certain level, it is critical to measure various aspects of cognition using the tools of psychological measurement. We look at medical reports with diagnosis. We can also look at audiograms, which is a graph that shows the softest sounds a person can hear at different pitches or frequency. Where the patient's results fall on the audiogram indicate the different degrees of hearing loss. We also look at vision screening by ophthalmologists. And what students can do is actually fill out our disability verification form, which is available on our website. When we're evaluating disability documentation, good documentation would include the following. So for example, the diagnosis and date of assessment, the type of assessment tools used, for example, the Nelson-Denny reading test, So the purpose of the test is to measure reading ability among high school and college students. We would be looking at functional limitations. So a person has a functional limitation when he or she, because of a disability, does not have the physical, cognitive, or psychological ability to independently perform the routine activities of daily living. We would look to see if the name, address, and phone number of the qualified professional is listed on the documentation, if the license number and credentials of the qualified professional is listed on the documentation, and whether the qualified professional has signed the documentation. Again, Student Disability Services does not accept altered or incomplete documentation to evaluate for accommodations. So these are the rights through the Student Disability Service Office. Students with disabilities at the University of Toledo have the right to equal access to facilities, technology, learning environments, and participation in programs, activities, and services offered by the University of Toledo. Confidentiality of any documentation or correspondence pertaining to the nature of a disability, accessible technology such as alternative formats for information and means of effective communication, and students have the right to express concerns or make suggestions for the facilitation of access and accommodations on the University of Toledo's campus. Student Disability Services views all correspondence and documentation pertaining to the nature of a student's disability as confidential. Only SDS staff can access this information, which is protected by the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974, which is FERPA. FERPA is a United States federal law that governs the access to educational information and records by public entities such as potential employers, publicly funded educational institutions, and foreign governments. For additional information on FERPA and confidentiality, visit the University of Toledo Registrar's website. SDS will retain all disability documentation per the university's documentation retention policy. We currently serve many students here with various disabilities at Student Disability Services Office. So for example, we may serve a student who has attention deficit disorder, where they can have difficulty focusing, forgetfulness, problem paying attention. This is where we would look at accommodations such as reduced distraction testing environment, sitting closer to the professor. We have various accommodations for attention deficit disorder. We serve students who may have disabilities in the areas of reading, writing, processing, and math. So for example, if a student has a slower processing speed when it comes to taking math tests, they may be eligible for extended time. We treat students who have mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. So for example, if a student has panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, which can cause them to get extremely anxious within the testing environment, again, we would look at testing in a reduced distraction environment. We serve students who have traumatic brain injuries, mobility and sensory impairments, such as individuals who use wheelchairs. We serve students who have chronic health conditions. This could include students who have cancer and autoimmune disorders. And we also serve students who have temporary impairments. So for example, if a student were to break their dominant hand while taking courses and needed assistance with writing a test, we could provide those temporary accommodations. What I'm going to do now is go over the process for establishing services with the Student Disability Services Office. All students applying to Utoledo are held to the same admission standards regardless of disability status. For additional information on admission requirements for areas of study, refer to the appropriate admissions office. At the post-secondary level, students must be considered an otherwise qualified student. Therefore, it is important that the student review the technical standards of their program of study to determine their ability to meet program requirements with or without academic accommodations. Here is a screenshot of our Student Disability Services webpage information. As you can see, for each tab, there is a tab for students, instructor resources for working with students with disabilities, our SAM tab, which is our Student Accessibility Management System. This is actually where you enter information and complete a new student application. We have a tab for accessibility. Also listed here is our Student Disability Services Handbook. As you can see, the green tab would be clicking on the first step on how to affiliate in order to establish services with Student Disability Services. After a student clicks on Affiliate for Services, they will be taken to the next screen, which is New Student Application. The student will click on New Student Application, and the application will ask them information about the student, such as name, last name, program at the University of Toledo. In addition, the student can fill out information about how their disability currently impacts them in the educational setting. In addition, the student will be able to upload their disability documentation when completing the application. Once the application is complete, the application will be reviewed by the accessibility team. The student will then receive an email whether they have met all the requirements and are eligible to set up an intake meeting with an accessibility specialist, or they will receive an email that the accessibility team will need additional documentation from the student in order to set up an intake appointment. After a student completes the Student Disability Services application, they supply the appropriate supporting disability documentation and complete the initial appointment with their accessibility specialist. That student will be eligible for accommodation memos. Students who choose to utilize accommodations must put requests into SAM every semester for accommodation memos to be generated to the student and instructor. The student and instructor will receive the accommodation memos via email every semester. Instructors are expected to provide all accommodations listed on the accommodation memos. So for example, if a student has extended time and testing at the Memorial Fieldhouse, the instructor will coordinate for that student to take the exam at the Memorial Fieldhouse instead of taking it in the classroom so that student can have reduced distraction environment. Here are examples of accommodations provided at the University of Toledo. Extended time on testing, testing in a reduced distraction environment, such as testing at Memorial Fieldhouse and the Academic Testing Center. If a student is a main campus student, they will most likely take their test with accommodations at the Memorial Fieldhouse. If a student is a health science campus student, they will most likely take their exams with accommodations at the Academic Testing Center. We provide e-text for students who may have reading disabilities. We provide enlarged exams for students who may have a vision disability. We provide special housing accommodations in which we work with housing. In addition, we also provide smart pens to students who have trouble taking notes within the classroom environment. The upcoming slide will have a video for Ohio College to Careers at the University of Toledo. This is a program of opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. Within the video, you will hear from OOD College to Career vocational counselor Tanola Mayfield Guerrero, who will speak about the services that are offered through this program.
Ohio College to Careers. Do you have a disability? We can help. We're Ohio College to Careers, a program of opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. We offer free help with career planning, internship and employment placement, resume and interview prep, and more.
Hi, my name is Tanola Mayfield Guerrero, OOD, College to Career Vocational Counselor at the University of Toledo. I want to welcome you to the University of Toledo and welcome you to College to Careers. College to Careers is a state initiative put into place to assist students with disabilities to be more successful in college. This initiative is also meant to assist students in transitioning from being a college student into their career. As a vocational counselor, I work alongside career services, student disability services, counseling services, and academic advisors. I also work with academic programs and departments at the university as well. Some of our services in College to Careers include resume development. We also assist with helping you prepare for interviews, and you also will have access to our extensive employer partner network. I'm located at Rocket Hall in Student Disability Services Suite. I can't wait to work with you. Again, welcome to the university, and go Rockets.
Ohio College to Careers is continuing to serve students remotely. Reach out to Tanola via phone, email, or text. Contact Tanola at tanola.mayfield-guerrero@ood.ohio.gov or 419-279-7049. Ohio College to Careers, a program of opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities.
So as mentioned, the benefits of working with a C2C counselor are connection to an employer network, internships and permanent employment, as well as career exploration and counseling services. The benefits include assistance navigating Ohio Means jobs, looking at different assistive technology available to individuals with disabilities, and resume and interview preparation. If you would like to contact the University of Toledo's admission office or Student Disability Services office, if you have further questions or concerns, please feel free to look at the contact information located below. Here's our phone number for each office.